Yat Eitne, Masan Nishlin. This is Navajo Grandma. Thank you for joining me today. Today, Grandma's going to honor the great chief, Piupiumaksmaks. And his name, basically, when you interpret it, is Yellowbird. Okay? He is the chief of the Walla Walla tribe. Grandma and Grandpa went to Washington State and went to Walla Walla. And there we saw this statue. And this is a Piupiumaksmaks. And he was a wonderful chief. And I have to tell you, when we were leaving, I kept getting this impression over and over and over. And I knew we weren't to leave. When I went to this statue, this is just the pre statue before they put it out in the town. And this statue, I kept feeling it pulling me, and finally it just drove me nuts, and I said, we've got to go there. So I went to the base of this statue. I was reading it, I took a picture of him, and just then I heard someone say, just as clear as a bell, tell my story. I looked around and realized that Grandpa was not around, and I just thought, okay, and it was like a sad thing, almost, but it was like someone saying, tell my story. So I almost cried. Here is a picture, a sketch that was done of him, and as well as there was a group picture, and someone took this one of him. And so anyways, that's who I'm honoring today. And his name again is Piupiumaksmaks. And his name means Yellowbird, chief of the Walla Walla. Grandma is honoring the great chief Piupiumaksmaks, who is called Yellowbird. And that's why I also have my chief's blanket. And it is an honor. And he was the head chief of the Walla Walla tribe. He's the son to the preceding chief. Now you've got to remember, I don't know how to say a lot of these things. Tumatapun. So he is basically the son of Chief Tumatapun. Now, Piupiumaksmaks was born in the late 1700s, and he became the head chief of the Walla Wallas, as well as a leader among the inland tribes. At the 1855 Treaty Council, he resisted the reservation policy. As such, the council resulted in 3 treaties establishing the Yakima, Nez Perce, and Umatilla Indian reservations. However, all of the remaining tribal lands were ceded to the United States. Piupiumaksmaks was later killed, and his body was mutilated during the Battle of Walla Walla while he was negotiating for his people under a flag of truce. Grandma's going to read some information about this, because you got to remember, I don't know, I'm not so intelligent that I can just breathe in all of the Walla Walla history, okay? So I'm going to read to you about this great chief, Piupiumaksmaks. While residing at Fort Hall, Jason Lee was greeted by Yellowbird, who presented the missionary with 2 horses after a test of his medical skills. Yellowbird later brought his eldest son, To'ayanu, to be educated at the Methodist mission, who was christened after Elijah Heading. Late in 1844, Yellowbird organized the Walla Walla expedition with around 40 Walla Walla, Nez Perce, and Cayuse men, in addition to their families, reached New Helvetia to trade for cattle. After capturing horses that had been previously stolen, an altercation arose with one of Sutter's employees, ending with the death of To'ayanu. Isaac Stevens met Yellowbird while headed east to chart a path for a Pacific Railroad in 1853, finding the chief to have a dignified manner. Yellowbird then owned over 2,000 horses, besides many cattle, and maintained a farm outside Fort Nez Perce. Despite fears by Sacramento settlers of an invasion force of 1,000 Walla Wallas in early 1846, Yellowbird returned with only 40 warriors and declared peaceable intentions while discussing with Joseph Warren Revere, who was engaged commanding volunteers at New Helvetia. Yellowbird said this: "I have come from the forests of Oregon with no hostile intentions. We have come to hunt the beasts of the field and also to trade our horses for cattle. For my people require cattle, which are not so abundant in Oregon as in California. I have come to, according to the custom of our tribes, to visit the grave of my poor son Elijah, who was murdered by a white man. But I have not traveled thus far only to mourn. I demand justice." The returning party contained those infected with measles, which eventually began to spread across the Columbia Plateau. The outbreak of the disease amongst the Cayuse was a major contributory factor that led to the Whitman Massacre. Yellowbird was present during the 1855 Council of the Yakima War period. As the war commenced, Yellowbird, who is Piupiumaksmaks, had his village near the mouth of the Touche River. With the advance of an American military unit, he presented himself as a hostage and insisted an end to the conflict. The nearby encamped Walla Wallas began awaiting for the appearance of head chief of the Cayuse, Five Crows, brother-in-law of Yellowbird and maternal half-brother of Tukakas, old Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce, before determining to pitch a battle or not. In a meeting with one of his sons the next morning, Yellowbird advised that a peaceful route be taken. During the first day of the Battle of Walla Walla on December 7, Yellowbird was killed by the Oregon volunteers who were holding him hostage. Soon afterwards, he was decapitated and scalped by one of the volunteers. What happened was the soldiers and the volunteers they completely scalped him and with every bit of his hair. Then they made coins of his skull. And they took pieces of his body and sent it to different military men. If that isn't horrific, I don't know what is. The battle resulted in the death of the Walla Walla tribal leader, Piupiumaksmaks, along with the deaths of 6 volunteers and between 75 and 100 natives. People always ask, are they federally recognized? The Confederate tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation are the federally recognized confederations of the 3 Sahaptin-speaking Native American tribes who traditionally inhabited the Columbia River Plateau region, the Cayuse, Umatilla, and the Walla Walla. Walla Walla means many waters. That's why Grandma's sitting, if you can see behind me. Can you hear the water trickling? So beautiful. But Walla Walla people, that to them, that's what it means. Many waters. Many lived on the Confederated reservation of the Umatilla. They share land and government structure with the Cayuse and the Umatilla tribes as part of the Confederated tribes of the Umatilla. The reservation is located in the area close by Pendleton, Oregon, near the Blue Mountains. And their first encounter was, at the time, a long time before that, was with Lewis and Clark expedition. And they had so many horses. And so that was the principal wealth of the tribe. They were expert horsemen and horse breeders. And they subsisted on food like salmon, roots, berries, deer, and elk. In 1855, the Cayuse, Umatilla, and Walla Walla tribes and the U.S. government negotiated a treaty in which 6.4 million acres were ceded in exchange for a reservation homeland, which consisted of 250,000 acres. You wonder why Chief Piupiumaksmaks totally disagreed with that. As a result of the federal legislation in the 1800s, that reduced its size of the Umatilla Reservation, which is now 172,000 acres. 158,000 acres just east of Pendleton, Oregon, 14,000 acres in the McKay, Johnson, and McCoy Creek areas southeast of Pilot Rock, Oregon. Within the treaty, this is what's inherent. They have the inherent right to fish in the normal, usual places and accustomed sites, and that they can go hunt and gather traditional foods and medicine on public lands in all the ceded areas, which is good. There are nearly 3,000 members in the three tribes. You know, through all the stuff they've gone through, this is what they say. Though our lands and way of life have been taken since European contact, we hold strong to our ancestry and culture. Our traditional religion, Washat, or 7 drums, is still practiced by some tribal members. They do have a language program that is now being taught to preserve and revive languages of the Umatilla, Walla Walla, and the Cayuse people. So Grandma, when I saw this statue and it stands there and I felt him calling to me, I'm very glad I answered. No, I can't. There's so much here that you cannot even imagine, the information and the history. But Grandma just touched on some of this. But when someone asks you to tell their story, you can do the best you can. And that's basically what Grandma did for him. I hope, again, he woke me up and said the same thing to me this morning. So I think those are the spiritual connections you have with those who are incredible leaders. And here again is the sketch that was made of him. And again, another picture. And that picture really is with a group of Walla Walla chiefs and whatnot. But Anyways, this is him. He was a very peaceful man, and I'm honored to share this with you. And Grandma always gets really emotional. I thought of my grandfather when I read about him, and because he loved his people, he wanted to make sure that they were fed and they ate, they had land. This is what my grandfather did. And so I honor him as I honor my grandfather. And this is him. And this is Piupiumaksmaks. I'm glad I met him when we were there. And I hope you hold him sacred too and learn about him. Grandma hasn't told you everything, but learn about him. Go study him and see what you might learn that Grandma did not share. So anyways, Grandma wants to thank you for listening and hearing sometimes the pain of what other tribes go through. I did say, well, I'm going to save him for the Native American month this coming year. And it was not, I know he did not want that. I felt that spiritually. And those are things that we need to listen to these things that we hear in our hearts. And we can hear the trees and the earth and the water, and we can hear the rocks. These are elements that were created for us. And though the white man will laugh and say, you know, you sound psychologically warped, no, I'd say you're psychologically warped because you don't have the spirit that we've been given. It's actually given to everyone, but not everyone can hear it as much as a native. When you grow up on the land, when you are foraging for berries and you are close to the land and the father sky and the wind and all of the elements of the earth, you get to understand their language, and it's very godly. And that's what Grandma was describing when I stood there and I heard him say, tell my story. And it's not because the story has never been told. He wanted me to share with you, those of you who don't know. And I'm very honored to have done this. And thank you so much. And before Grandma finishes, can all of you who won your prizes please send your name and your address to Grandma? We need to get that out to you, and I love you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again. Ayaha. Hagone.